Okay, recently I had an ad hoc installation of a solar panel project. Went up on the roof of this garage. I've got it down pat even in the panels were used, there's 16 of them. I believe they're currently, even though they're used, they're capable of 200...
They're 250 watt Canadian solars.
Wherever I'm at, any time of the day, even at night. And they're capable of putting out 200. How much do you think now? Because they're a little.
Well, it all just depends on the light, but that's what they're rated at, is 250.
They're rated at 250 to 16 of them. You multiply 16 by 250, you get about 4,000.
Correct.
Anyway, so the system I was going to install was intended to be able to feed into the house and augment power in the house, but not necessarily go onto the grid, correct? It wouldn't have been able to go feed electricity onto the grid?
No, it's not grid. It cannot backfeed.
Because it's not UL listed.
Correct.
And it probably would not get a permit to backfeed.
Correct.
So ultimately, based on these factors, decided to decommission it, even though it had never been fully commissioned. And however, it is a good solution, would you say, for a cabin or something that's off the line, off the grid?
Correct. It's set up more for a grid or off-grid system.
And it would probably provide about 4,000 watts at peak. And that would...
That's the DC, that's on the DC side. Yeah, it just all depends on how you orientate the panels and what sun you're getting.
So that's probably about what, 20
But
amps?
it's a 6,000 watt capable inverter.
And the inverter, and that would be this unit here. With battery backup over
48
here.
volt battery system.
And how long do you think something like that would normally last? A couple hours if the power went out and you under normative
Oh,
loads?
it all depends on what you're trying to run. I mean, it's about a 5 kilowatt hour battery. And this is lithium iron phosphate chemistry. So, if you're just trying to do some lights in our fridge, you could probably run it for a while. But if you're trying to do much more,
So if you had a cabin out in the woods somewhere with no
But you could add to
electricity,
it.
you could add more batteries, whatever you wanted to do. There's factors related to that. Now, of course, you don't just get panels, and you get a battery, and you get an inverter. That all has to be hooked together,
correct.
and it has to be safely done, and somebody has to know what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
And it's going to require lots of different kinds of cables and mounting hardware. You have to have an isolate. This is an isolation
Yeah,
switch, right?
it's a DC disconnect.
And that would be between the panels and the inverter. And then, of course, you'd have
That's
it.
for the battery.
That would be a battery isolator. Still a lot of things I'd like to see. So basically, with everything that's here, couldn't tell exactly which way the wind blows. Based on decommissioning it, do you think that everything is here for pretty much here for somebody to be able to install it on a cabin or something?
Yeah, I mean, it should be fairly complete. It all depends on how far your wire runs are and all that. So
it'd be a nice solution for like an isolated workshop or something where you wanted to have lights and maybe a refrigerator or a light heater or something for the winter, and as long as the sun's shining and you didn't go without sun for a couple hours, as long as you were working by day, you'd probably have some power and you'd have some backup battery power.
yeah, and you can always add to this battery. This battery and inverter have never been used. So
They are
they're
new.
brand new.
And the reason why a contractor who has a license to do this wouldn't install it is because it's not UL listed and therefore there would be some responsibility on the part of the contractor.
Yeah, correct. This is not a system that you can tie to the grid, and it doesn't meet UL requirements, so you can't technically pull a permit.
Okay, so
Depends on your jurisdiction. Some inspectors are pretty lenient, but it's not something that, it's more for off-grid applications.
and I think I spent something like $7,000 to $8,000 for everything you're seeing here. And so the idea would be, since we're going to go to a system that can go on the grid, that is UL listed, that can get permitted by the state, and there is some funding available from the state of Oregon in order to install such a system, we basically pulled all this off the roof of our garage, and now it's available to someone who, with a cabineted solution, and what would you estimate its value would be to somebody who was doing something like that? Maybe $3,000-4,000, right?
Yeah, it's whatever
Whatever you want to do. So basically, you would have to hire somebody who knew what they were doing. I would always recommend hiring somebody who had at least done one such cabineted installation, so they knew what they were about. Because when you're dealing with electricity, it can get kind of risky, fire-wise or something else. So anyway, this is available to someone who may want to follow up and install or augment a system they already have. For instance, the battery and the inverters could be added to a pre-existing solar system, and it would provide more current and more backup. And the panels could be added too, and then plumbed in electrically into a pre-existing system. Is that correct? So that it would add more storage in terms of the battery, inversion power in terms of the inverter, and more solar electricity.
I'm sure lots of people can think of creative ways to utilize the system.
All right,
It could be in a van. It could be you could do a lot of weird things.
Well, if you had like an old school bus that you converted into a home, you could mount them on the roof, or you could take them out and tilt them towards the sun. You want to make sure there's no shade on them. So that's basically the complete system here that is available if somebody wants to contact me, and I'll add that contact information here for that purpose. Well, anyway, there we go with that.